Well, one thing's for sure, there just aren't enough games about samurai. That's one thing that Throne of Darkness does well right off the bat. It's a hack-and-slash action role-playing game that's set in medieval Japan during a fictional period in its history, a fictional period which is plagued with monsters and demons and ogres and all kinds of stuff like that. So the game is reminiscent of other action role-playing games, such as, of course, Blizzard's Diablo series. And in fact, the people who founded the company worked on the original Diablo game, and the influence of that game comes across pretty noticeably in Throne of Darkness. It's also an isometric game where you're fighting lots and lots of different things pretty much the entire time. It's pretty light on the role-playing elements, very, very heavy on the combat. So you should know full well that that's what you're getting into with the game right off the bat. If that's what you're looking for, then Throne of Darkness does a pretty good job with it. It may look like Diablo, but it actually has some pretty distinctive features. The most notable of which is that you don't control just one character, as in most games of its kind, but in fact you control a total of 7. And at any given moment you could have 4 of these characters in action. There are different types of samurai that have sort of been made popular in various films, such as most noticeably the Seven Samurai, Akira Kurosawa's film. And these characters include like the leader and the swordsman and the archer and a giant called the Brick and so forth. So during play, you're controlling these 7 characters 4 at a time. They're all running together in coordination, and they're all attacking together. You, in fact, control only one of them yourself, while the computer handles up to 3 others. And at any point, you can swap any of your characters out. They'll head back to their castle, to their daimyo, their master, and the daimyo can in turn teleport their other rested-up comrades in the fray. So a lot of the game revolves around being in battle, you know, watching how your various characters are doing and sending some back to rest and calling others in on the fly. It's a pretty interesting system, and it keeps the otherwise simplistic action, you're just kind of pointing and clicking on stuff and slashing at it. It keeps this action pretty interesting because you're just constantly fighting, constantly getting new stuff for each of these 7 characters. They're all gaining levels and so forth. The game's interface is a bit confusing at first, but actually works quite well once you get into it. But then again, not all the features are completely well implemented. For instance, the game has a battle tactics feature where you can set your characters into various preset formations and so forth. So you can, you know, have your wizard character move to the back of the bunch or something like that. This doesn't work out that well because the tactics are named after animals. It sounds kind of martial arts themed, like frog and centipede and so forth. But there's nothing intuitive about this, and the tactics just don't work very well. The options for the different characters are pretty limiting, and you'll find that if you just send all 4 of your guys straight into the fray, things will work just as well that way. The game's got some other issues. For instance, it's interesting that you get to control 7 different characters, yet you'll find that all 7 of these, they're fairly similar to one another in a lot of ways. There's a big difference between, say, the wizard and the Brick, but then from one character to the next, they're fairly analogous. They're all, you know, relatively strong. You could put any of them, you know, at the front of a battle once you get them strong enough so that they can equip, you know, some of the better weapons and armor. The game's spell system also isn't very well balanced. It's interesting that every single one of your 7 characters can use magic, and yet a lot of the spells you'll find aren't particularly useful, and in fact the computer-controlled characters will only use the one spell that they currently have equipped, so it's very hard to use spells in conjunction with each other to sort of coordinate attacks, and this ties back in with the tactics system. It's just not robust enough to let you create meaningful strategies. You'll just find that a full force, you know, head-on attack is pretty much always the best approach. The game is, of course, playable in single player, but also in multiplayer modes. You could play online over Sierra's proprietary service. The multiplayer turns into a sort of king of the hill type of system where the object, as in the single player game, is to defeat Zanshin, the dark warlord, kind of riding high in his castle in the middle of the country. And once you do this in multiplayer, then you become the Dark Warlord's own disciples and other players will have to get through you before they can get to him. So it's kind of a recurring process like that, but it takes quite a long time to actually get to the big bad guy at the end, and it takes quite a long time to beat him. So these aren't really conducive to short rounds of play or anything like that, but at least you can sort of jump right to an enemy player's castle in multiplayer and have at it with him, kind of run amok on his home turf. Throne of Darkness looks pretty good. It's the animations are nice and detailed. The colors look a little bit washed out, and the game is locked in 800 by 600 resolution. But a lot of the enemies look pretty good as well, just like the characters, and the various death animations and so on are pretty well done. And although the game's various settings all kind of look uniformly similar, so the game kind of has a consistent look about it. The game has a minimal kind of Japanese-style musical score that works really well, kind of playing faintly in the background, and otherwise the sound effects are pretty effective in maintaining the tone and style of the game and keeping with the sort of Asian flavor. All in all, Throne of Darkness is quite good at what it does. It's, again, a fairly straightforward hack-and-slash action RPG, and it has good graphics and it sounds good as well. It's got a nice long quest, and the various characters and monsters are pretty interesting to look at and fun to fight. It's not the most complicated game you'll ever play, and the various tactics stuff can just as easily be ignored as used. But if you're a fan of games such as Diablo, then I think you'll probably enjoy having to manage all these different characters as opposed to just one. So if a bunch of samurai hacking and slashing against a bunch of vicious turtle monsters and enemy ninjas and undead skeletons and stuff like that sounds like your cup of tea, then you'll find that Throne of Darkness definitely fits the bill.